Welcome everybody to the Depths of Motherhood podcast. This is a special season dedicated to the tribe of the mother, but also I know any mothers listening will find this extremely valuable. I've created each episode to offer simple, digestible, and supportive information, which I hope will educate and inspire anyone who listens. So this is by popular demand. Please help us to educate and support the tribe holding the mother. Look forward to passionate and highly knowledgeable guests dedicated to reclaiming the essence of birth and embracing conscious parenting. Throughout our time together, our guests will serve as the guiding voices, illuminating the path towards a deeper understanding of preconception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. This is with the mother and the baby being the center of the exploration. In the show notes, you'll discover the link to Nourished Mother package, which will offer many different resources to complement each episode. This is free for all members in the Women's Circle, or £33 for everybody who just wants to purchase the package. A heartfelt thank you to our incredible guests and immense gratitude to my partner for supporting me on this creation. And finally, last but not least, special thank you to Araya, my daughter, for being the endless well of inspiration. Welcome everybody to this week's episode. Today we have Anna, the spiritual midwitch on Instagram, joining us on the show. Anna is a former midwife, women's work facilitator, yoga teacher and coach, and for over a decade she's been holding space for women in circle, one-on-one sessions, and also walking alongside women and their families through the transformational rite of passage that is birth. Anna has a depth of embodied wisdom when it comes to both the physiology of birth and the spiritual aspect of birth, and combines her knowledge in her own birth work as a spiritual midwife, as well as a mentor for others through her courses and coaching. In her Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship Program, Anna teaches about natural physiological birth and how to hold this sacred and spiritual birth space. And right now her doors are open to join the Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship, so I'll leave the link in the show notes so you can get more information. So after years of working at home, in birth centres and hospitals, and being a part of the broken maternity system that causes 1 in 3 women to experience birth trauma, she chose to step out on her own as an educator and change maker, and actively works to speak the truth about the power of natural physiological birth, and exposes the over-medicalized maternity system for the harm it can cause to women, babies, and families. So not only will you find her on Instagram, you can also find her podcast, The Natural Birth Podcast, which I'll leave in the show notes. This conversation is all about our right to birth undisturbed, and how we can advocate for ourselves, how we can come to find our voice so that our yes is a yes and our no is a no. Also bringing light to the ways that people outside of us can make it feel almost impossible for our needs to be met, for our wishes to be respected. And I feel that just by listening to this conversation and by bringing awareness to this topic, we can come to see how, yes, it might be uncomfortable to ask for what we need, and how we can get really comfortable being uncomfortable, and we might have to push ourselves. And Anna really dives into the history to reveal ways in which a woman's voice there's been an attempt to silence, to push it out, to suppress it, to distort it, all in the attempts of keeping us in line within a certain system. And for myself, I realized throughout my whole life, I had moved away from situations or people that had put me in a position where I might have to speak up and express my boundaries. And I would just move, or I would end the relationship in avoidance of this. So I never really realized that I had a disconnect to expressing my needs or saying no. I simply just avoided. But being pregnant with Araya, I could do that through my pregnancy, and I did. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. I thought that I was a change maker in my lineage of staying away from the medical system. But what I also did was push other people away from supporting me at my greatest moment, my greatest opening. And on reflection, this was done from fear. And I didn't really take into account what it would mean to be completely cracked open on all levels, giving birth. And so I talk about this in the episode, and also how it brought me to a point to reveal areas of myself that I was disconnected from. And it didn't end there. It continued to bring situations where I needed to use my voice to say what I need or to say no. And I feel like motherhood is that journey of, if we are really aligning with our heart, with our truth, when the situations come up where our voice is needed, if we don't use our voice, that situation doesn't go away. We'll be dreaming of it, thinking about it, or the situations will come up again, so that we can get the opportunity to actually express ourselves, to set our boundaries, or to move towards things that we do want. This conversation is so much more than rules and regulations of what our rights are. It is going deeper into what it really means to align to our heart, to really understand the language of our body and be able to communicate that with the world, and also feel like you're part of a tribe of women that are really ready to step out of the comfort zone in order to have our voice be heard. So whatever your life experience has been to this point, and whatever will come, just a reminder that it's not always so simple as to say, I'm going to speak my truth, or I am going to set my boundaries. Sometimes these wounds, these fears are really deep, and we can once again get ourselves in a pattern. But I just trust within myself that I come back and I reflect. And with that reflection, I get to know myself more deeply. I get to look at the situation and ask, if I could go back in time, what would I say? What would I do? And I feel like this just prepares me if something else comes up in the future. Before we begin, I just want to give you an update on what's happening in our online space. So in the Women's Circle, we have an event happening this Sunday, and we will be celebrating and tuning into the energy of Lammas, which is the point between the summer solstice and the beginning of autumn. So really we'll be tuning into what seeds we planted in February, which was in bulk. So our seeds of our intention. And we'll be coming to see what has happened since February till this point. What things have we come to learn about ourselves? What insights have we had? What has come to fruition? It will also be the dark moon as well. So we'll be having a beautiful meditation practice to guide us inwards, so that we can just spend this moment in time going and diving into the heart space, a moment to drop the voices around telling us, informing us, and instead coming to find that place within. And a reminder that the video for this recording is in the Nourished Mother package. You can find the link in the show notes, and in there is every video from this season, where we're going from conception all the way to postpartum. And within that, I'm also adding further resources, which might come in the form of an ebook or a video or an audio, all to complement this journey that we're on. So let's take a deep breath together and guide that first breath into the heart space, and come to land in the heart. And another breath in, just awakening your senses so you can become more present to this moment. And the final breath in, opening to receive what is meant for you, what can support you on your journey. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your support with this podcast. Thank you to Anna for all your wisdom and time creating this beautiful episode. Welcome to the show, Anna. I am so happy to have you here. I would just to start, let you land in this space. Thank you for being here. If anyone hears a little puppy, there's a puppy in the background, so we welcome the puppy in too for all the wisdom that it holds. Let's just start by seeing where you're at today and where in the world are you?
Radio, yes. So I am in Sweden, which is my homeland where I grew up, but I haven't lived here for a long time. So I've been quite nomadic in my life. I haven't lived anywhere longer than a year since I was 17. So I've been very nomadic. I'm turning, 38 this year. So it's been a long life of traveling around and living in different countries and doing so many different things in my life. But I ended up being in Australia for the longest part, so on and off for 15 years. And that's where I became a midwife and among so many other things. And where I also kind of landed in this purpose of mine that is to advocate for the almost extinct physiological births of women and children, because I believe women are born as well through childbirth as a mother, and also the mentor of those who wants to become sacred birth workers and uphold the sacredness and honoring the rite of passage from maiden to mother for women and their families as well.
That's beautiful. And is that how your name on Instagram came, the spiritual midwitch? This
Yeah. So,
transition.
yeah. So what happened was that, so before I became a midwife, my purpose in life was to hold women's circles. And I worked a lot with women. I was, again, before becoming a midwife, probably 10, 15 years, I would hold women's circles. I called women's temples, journeys, coaching women in everything from reclaiming the first rite of passage, which is the menarche, our first bleed, women's sexuality, our voice, working with our voice, the witch wound, the sisterhood wound. My calling from a very young age has been to patch up and heal the sisterhood for us all to gather authentically from our hearts and to really honor being woman, being cyclic, being emotional, being sensitive, being water, being one with the moon, because most women I feel on the earth, I mean, it's awakening now, but I started this 15, 20 years ago with women, which there was barely any women's circles back then. That's something that's really just blossomed in the last 5, maybe 10 years. But when I started doing it, no one was doing it. I was in Sweden, one of the first people who back then I called it Shakti circles. Anyway, I was on a big journey of just being with women in circle, in ceremony, and sitting with women to reclaim who we really truly are. And then I was in this amazing place called Byron Bay in Australia. And there, very few places in the world, especially in the Western world, can you actually become a midwife where you walk alongside home birth midwives, birth center birth midwives. In my area, 25% had home births, and I would say maybe the rest, there was maybe 80% of the rest would have birth center births, like physiological natural ones, right? And then there would be some transfers and there would be some going to the bigger hospitals because of, medical reasons or choice. But most people wouldn't. So it was a very unique place to become a midwife. And it just felt like it was the continuation for me to do so, to work with women like at that portal. And so I became a midwife. I worked in hospitals, birth centers, and as a home birth midwife. But in 2019, in the end there, I had done this 1 year at the hospital, and I was just feeling so traumatized by my years in the system. I had enough and I gave my resignation. And that day, I started my Instagram account with my name, The Spiritual Midwife. And that was my name for, I don't know, 3, 4 years before I decided to deregister as a midwife. And then I changed my name to the Spiritual Midwitch, because not everywhere around the world, but in Australia where I was registered, it's a criminal offense for me to be a deregistered midwife and call myself a midwife. I really love the word midwife. I really resonate with it. I loved my name, the spiritual midwife. I really resonated with it still. So the midwitch is a compromise and it's a bit of a FU to the system and just a really a claiming of my wise woman of being like, well, I guess I need to really embody what actually, in the witch trials, midwives were the first to burn. All midwives were eradicated, like the wisdom of the midwives. The midwives weren't just at birth, they were at, attending people as they were dying. They were the wise women, the wisdom keepers. That is also what witch means. And so it's kind of a reclaiming of that word, even though most people don't know this. So, yes, I have been called now spiritual midwitch for a while, and that's howdy.
Wow, such a beautiful story. I'm curious, so the word midwife has been colonized then, or was it that
Yes.
the word midwife was used before and then it's being colonized? Is that?
Oh, yes. I mean, the word midwife is so old. And yes, it has been, I say stolen by the powers to
Yes.
be, who now have stolen the word to a medical midwife. It means someone who has attended a, well, it's different around the world, I guess, but most places has a medical degree, a university degree. Some places obviously can go to kind of college or TAFE but it's still regulated under a medical board, usually not by midwives themselves, but by doctors, medical personnel, nurses,
Mm,
and they put the standards and the codes and the guidelines and all of this that a midwife need to follow, and that is getting narrower and narrower. There's less autonomy every day as we speak for midwives. I mean, midwives, this is the oldest profession, midwife and prostitute. Like
mm,
these are the oldest professions for women
mm,
back, how far you want to go. And midwives were the last ones that where women could still work, as patriarchies stepped in a few thousand years back, especially with the big three major religions, where, there was now one God and women were to be just in the house and caring for her children and birthing children, have a job. And the last job a woman could have was being a midwife. And so that was women's business for a long time, very long time before yet again men stepped in
mm.
and decided that they would also want to have that power over women's bodies and the birth process. And that's how obstetrics was born, They learned on poor women and slaves. In America, it was slaves. And, in other places, it was poor women who didn't maybe have housing, couldn't afford. And so they were given shelter and food in the hospital, but then they had to lie on their backs and birth with doctors who could learn about the process and about the woman's bodies. Like that's the brutal history of it.
So
Yeah.
as they separated women from this practice and mothers from the midwives, they also took away this connection to death as well. Like you mentioned, the midwives
Yeah.
of life and death. There's also then the separation of death. And that is, I had a conversation recently and just how interconnected they are, and how when we
Yes.
birth in our own sovereignty, undisturbed, there is this appreciation and acceptance that death is around us at all times. We get to be with that. And I'm really glad that you opened up with this, because I feel it brings the roots to everything that we're talking about and exploring, and why for many of us, we feel it inside of our bones that this information is so needed, but not just as logical information, but as embodied. And to see it, when we see and hear these stories of women reclaiming their bodies, reclaiming their experiences, I think inside of us as women, we just like open up our hearts, feel that, to be like, wow, it's coming back to us, and
Mm.
awaken something we've always known. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing and using your words to unravel this as well. And it's interesting that you said your first circle was Shakti Circle. I started around
Mm.
10 years ago, and that was the first name of my circle too. There was nothing around, and I was just like going in blindly, but knowing a feeling inside
Yeah.
that there was so much when women sat together, and I didn't have any instructions or guidance, but I just learned by sitting and observing in circle, like what this means to come together and how each woman's sense of safety is so individual. Like we can only intend to create this space. And that just like really helped me to understand as well, coming into this rite of passage into motherhood, of like the space where a mother is giving birth. It's her, how she feels safe in this time, and people can share their stories. They can share what we might need for a physiological birth, but still the essence of that safety is deep, deep, deep within. And I really love this guiding into this topic now of our rights, because for many mothers, even though they might understand physiological birth, even though they might know logically with their mind all of these things, when it comes to it, when they really get down to the roots, there might be something that is almost in the way, and they feel safer in a certain environment. It might be a medicalized environment, a hospital environment, or having people around them, whatever it is. And I say this because the movement online has been very strongly for the last few years of free birth. If you could begin to like dive into what of, oh, it sounds even silly saying this, but the rights of a woman who is giving birth. What are her rights? What could she listen to you say right now that would help her to remember?
There's so much to say. And then yet, it's so simple. It's like, it's human rights, women's rights, birthrights, it's human rights. It's, the right to your own bodily integrity, sovereignty. It's the right of informed consent. It's the right of refusal. And that simply your no or yes is enough. You don't have to have an explanation. You don't even have to say it's an informed no, I know the evidence. You don't have to say anything. It's like if you feel in your intuition, in your gut, because this is the thing, Danielle, is that one of our superpowers as women is our intuition. Like, and I truly believe this, that each woman is born as the channel between the heavens and the earth. It's our birthright. We are born with something that I truly believe men are seeking through spiritual practices. We are born with this. But it's been ridiculed, shamed, said it doesn't exist. So to that point, and also for so many thousands of years, it's, been dangerous to be woman and to have a voice and to actually voice what you know. So you have to remember, like in your cells, you hold all your ancestors, their wisdom, but also their woundings, their traumas. And so why women still struggle with their voice, for example, speaking up to authority, sharing their truth, why they struggle voicing and following their intuition, it's because it's been actually life threatening to do so. It's been dangerous. So we have to have compassion with ourselves. I work with women who've had birth trauma, who've walked into the birthing system, right? And I do this a lot, who might be lawyers, might even work with human rights, who are women that are, CEOs, who are powerful women in the business world, who are leaders, who are powerful women in their voice in every area of their life. But as soon as they become pregnant and they step into this very like, it is the most patriarchal institution there is, and it infantilizes women to a degree that is like, it's even hard to comprehend. And women don't know this until they are there, and they're so shocked by it. And for the ones who really see it, but it's still so hard to speak up in it because it's a massive institution and people within it. Some are beautiful. Some midwives, nurses, obstetricians, birth workers are amazing in the system. They're doing their best for women and their families. But the system is not built for women. It is not. And so a lot of people working in that system also, whether or not they want to or not, have to follow those guidelines, those policies, the way they work. And it's, I recently, like how my day was before we started, like I was sitting with, a woman working with her birth trauma, and it doesn't matter how well informed you are. And she was, which just so many women I work with knew so much. She had birthed several babies. It continued to happen to her because she continued to be, which is so hard not to be, connected to the system, whether that is before the birth, during the birth, or after the birth for some reason. It could be for the child later on with the nurses. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, and we are also so indoctrinated to turn the blame towards ourselves. I didn't speak up enough. I didn't say enough. And I told her, doesn't matter who you are. When you're faced with doctors, nurses, other people around you tell you, just listen to the doctor, just do what they say. But your intuition is ringing clear, saying to you, no, I do not want this intervention. And you're saying no. And maybe you're saying no 10 times. Then you're just being coerced. They work at you till you say, okay, fine. And then you blame yourself, not them. This is what women do, and how I work with women so much in birth trauma. Like, stop beating yourself up. Years after, sometimes I have 60-year-old women coming to me sharing their birth trauma because they have then for like 40 years had shame and guilt and blamed themselves for the outcomes, how she's felt. But when I speak to her, I say, look at all this evidence. It was not you, and you could not have done anything else, anything different. It's the system. It is so powerful, Danielle. I can't even tell you. And I want to say that to every woman. It is so powerful. You have to choose your birth worker very wisely. And to be honest, if you don't have medical risks, true, and we can really speak about that one, true medical risk, and that means not just a big baby or diet controlled, gestational diabetes or all these things, or like you're older or your baby's 42 weeks, that's not high risk. If you truly have high risk, like you have a heart problem that you need to be in hospital to birth, like you have actual risks, then I truly believe you should not birth in a hospital. Because if you go into that hospital, your human rights are non-existent. That is actually the truth. Now, no one would say that, but that is the reality when women walk in. Like informed consent. Let's talk about informed consent, right? That is a human right, informed consent. It needs to be, for it to be informed consent, it needs to be willingly, freely, voluntarily given by the woman. When you walk into maternity services and a woman chooses to decline, say, for example, the antibiotics that they want to give if she has broken her waters for a prolonged time, or she has GBS positive or something like that and her waters are broken, and she says, no, thank you, that would not be just taken by that midwife, written down and accepted. No, during her labor, she's going to have to explain herself to that midwife. The midwife was most likely, and I've had the midwives tell me as I've been advocating for my clients that, oh, well, our baby can die. One of the things they will say. That is, if a woman accepts antibiotics after someone has told her, well, do you want your baby to potentially die? That is the risk of saying no to this. Do you think any mother would say no? And is that informed consent? No, it's not. Because let's talk about the risk then.
Big shout out to our sponsor, Evolving Humans, who are the pioneers for energy healing. This practice that I was taught 4 years ago has been studied by researchers all around the world to provide evidence of the physiological effects of energy healing. And I'm not just saying this because it's a promotion, but I have used this practice every single day for 4 years, and personally I've noticed the most impact in my emotional state. This energy practice taught me how to feel energy in my body and observe the sensations. The technique involves you using your hand and connecting to the energy field within your body. And with this gentle, loving awareness that you bring to the table, everything is seen and lived. The whole being comes into alignment. During the birth of my daughter, I tore, and the discomfort that I was experiencing with this tear started to ease up dramatically when I would use this technique. In the show notes, you'll find the link to Evolving Humans so that you can explore this healing technique, which is available through a course that you can join today.
The actual true risk of a baby dying from a mother being GBS positive, her water's broken, she's declining antibiotics, is one baby in 17,000. What is the percentage there? I mean, I'm not a mathematician, but it's a pretty low percentage. Now, of course, it's horrible and terrible, and no one wants a baby to ever, ever, ever die. But the risk of that is so minuscule. It's very, very tiny. Of course, that means, though, in a big tertiary hospital where there's thousands and thousands of births every year, they probably see 1, 2, maybe 3 babies die that year of that. And so, of course, they are afraid of that. They've seen that. They want the best for this baby and mother, right? So they're coming from a good place. But the way it's worded means it's not informed consent if a woman actually accepts that antibiotics. So when a woman walks into maternity services, especially if she's going to birth in a hospital, yes, I would say that her human rights of informed consent, 99% of the time, is not adhered to. Now, I'm not saying all midwives and doctors don't do that. Some are absolutely amazing and they listen to the woman and hear, okay, you have done your research, you know the stats, and you're declining, and it is true informed consent. She knows the risks and the benefits and the alternatives. It's something that should be communicated by her doctor or midwife in pregnancy so that she can make these decisions not when she's in labor. But let's talk about the scenario, right? So she's GBS positive, she's declining antibiotics. What happens in the hospital is that that midwife that is caring for her, according to the protocol in the hospital, most hospitals around the world, I mean, obviously I don't know everything about the world, but most of what I know is that she will then escalate that, she has to her midwifery manager, the midwife in charge of that floor. And then that manager will go in and also want to talk to the woman to make sure again, because they really want her to have what is in policy, right? So they want her to have the antibiotics. They're going to try again. And then she declines again to the midwifery manager. And then it's protocol to escalate to the pediatrician or the obstetrician in charge of that floor. So the woman has to fight 3 times, 3 different people, escalating in hierarchy, because it's a hierarchical system in the hospital. You shouldn't have to do that in labor. And that is going to derail your physiology so much. Interruption, having to work with your neocortex, your logical mind. Fear, maybe potentially hearing the dead baby card 3 times from 3 different people, the pediatrician, being the one that really slams it down. And I've witnessed this both as a midwife in the system, but then also as the sacred birth worker and advocate protecting women who for some reasons might need to birth in the hospital and then that contact me to be their birth advocate and sacred birth worker. I mean, most of the births I do are at home, but some will walk into the hospital because of the need to do so. And so I know this. I know it from both sides, both being the protector of that woman's space and then being a witness of being a midwife in those systems. So I would say to all women listening, if you don't medically need to be in a hospital and you want your basic human rights respected and don't have to have a fight on your hands if you're going to decline things that are protocol, that so much of it is unevidence-based, by the way, like CTG on women, especially low risk, but all women. If you want that, you need to source an independent midwife or team of midwives, either at home or independent birth centers that are run by midwives, not connected to a hospital, run by obstetricians and board members that know nothing about anything.
Wow. Thank you so
There's
much
my
for
rant.
sharing that. No, that's so powerful. And as you're speaking, I'm actually getting flashbacks of my own experience. And I realized something as you were speaking that I feel that I possibly pushed away every form of support because of fear of using my own voice, even with people out of the system. So I did have a midwife ready to support me. But as it got closer and I went into my cave more and more, I decided I wanted to do it alone, which ended up me being in the hospital actually. And on the other side, as I reflect, I continue to do regression work to see what was meant to be seen. What I thought, where I thought I was moving from, like, I'll say like my heart, I actually feel I was moving from fear. So I think my actions were based on fear and trauma and not being able to use my voice. Because now, as I've gone on my journey and I've done reflection work, I had experience again after my birth and it was such a simple moment in time where I was having a massage after my birth and I did not use my voice to say, you're hurting me. Like, this is too hard. Like, my body is too sensitive. And I didn't say anything again. And I left and I cried and I felt so even more traumatic than the birth in some ways because I was expecting the hospital to do things to me that I didn't want to do. But I wasn't expecting this woman who was supposed to hold my body. And so, like, I cried and cried. And that moment of seeing all that, I realized I have this moment, this opening to really allow my voice to be heard, even if it's uncomfortable. So then, obviously, the universe gave me moments in time where I had to use my voice. And with having my daughter, there was many more occasions where I had to advocate for her. I had to speak for her, protect her, to say no to people trying to take a photo of her. And even though I felt uncomfortable, I did that because I had had this unraveling and I saw that I have to learn to trust myself and use my voice and trust that I can hold the situation on the other side. So I was curious if you've also seen this in your practice with the women that you work with, of them running away from support and putting
Yes.
themselves in this situation.
Massively. I mean, there's so much awakening. I mean, period. Like, I would say every woman on this planet holds blockages in her throat chakra from just the lineage of women that were hunted and prosecuted because of using their voice. I mean, it's so deep within our bones and cells and cellular memory. We know now about transgenerational trauma. We know about epigenetics. It's actually proven by science. I mean, this is something that women have known throughout the ages, but it's now proven. It's not something we just make up. And when you really truly not just hear that, but truly understand that, you can also have compassion with how hard it is for us to speak our truth, our voice, to even, and I want to say for us, me included, especially when meeting authority, there's something triggered there. And it's usually easier to stand up for others, for your children, for your clients, than for yourself. And that's just how it is. And I think when we're aware of that, then that awareness can maybe sometimes, like you just spoke of, how you then could speak up for your child with the awareness from that you got from these experiences. When we have the awareness, we can start to change it, but we can also be compassionate when we can't. Just because we know something doesn't mean that now 100% of the times we're going to be able to speak up, and to be okay with that, as it is a process of reclaiming our voice and feeling safe using it.
Yeah, I
Because
love
it just,
that.
again, like I want to reiterate, it just hasn't been safe. And you know what? It's still not safe.
Yeah. I mean, we
Women are
see.
still being stoned around the world for using their voice or being just plainly being a woman. There's still prosecution of women. There's a definite witch hunt on midwives all over the world, and it's getting worse. Independent midwives I'm talking about here, right? Independent midwives, homebirth midwives, midwives who want to support women and who are for women, not for the institution, and doctors and others who do the same. I mean, there is definitely still happening, so it's still not safe. It's still an act of rebellion and, needs courage. And I think it's really important to also recognize that. I mean, for example, your human rights in pregnancy, birth, and postpartum throughout the continuum. I mean, anytime really in life, doesn't matter where you are in life, you have a right. Right to informed consent, right to refusal, right to bodily autonomy. but we're seeing around the world, for example, court orders where doctors are getting the court to judge that a woman will have a cesarean against her will because they claim it's safer for the child. Whether it is or not, that is just absolutely the biggest violation of a woman's bodily autonomy, sovereignty, all her human rights. And that's happened in Wales, in Ireland, in the US. I mean, around the world, that's happened.
As you said that before, like thinking about what's happening around the world, we are still, we are connected as a collective as well. And doing the work that you're doing, the mothers and the women coming forward to be so courageous to see their past, to hold space for their ancestral line, to witness it with compassion without trying to change it, is such a powerful act. I did a practice recently with some mothers where we witnessed our own birth. So we went back and we witnessed it ourselves coming from our mother's womb. And we stayed and we witnessed everything without trying to change it, just to see what was meant to be seen at that time. Because when something shakes us, when something makes us feel so unsafe, like parts of us leave, like parts of us leave the body because it feels so unsafe, and then we don't get to experience that full moment in time with all our awareness. And I feel like doing the work to really go back and see the moments, to see and feel and hear everything, is so powerful. But it really, like for me, as I've been doing this work, it takes so much practice to be with all of the uncomfortable arisings. And so that's like my practice in everyday life, is to get really comfortable at staying when it's uncomfortable, because one of my go-to things is to leave my body, to distract, to pretend everything's okay, or to kind of like false positivity. That's probably the spiritual path that I went onto, was like, change your mindset, everything's positive, and then you miss so much of this like evolutionary process through our ancestral line, what's come to us now. And I feel like everything that you've just shared, like, because you've been on both sides, you've been on the sides which is medical, the ins and outs of that, you've been there, you've seen it, you've lived it. And then this journey to like take a step back and look at this from an outside point of view and be able to hold it in such a way is so beautiful. It's so moving. And I did this meditation recently as well. I had this download very clearly of the men protecting the space, like as in making sure that no animals come in, no outside tribes come in to attack. So the mothers and the children can be safe. The women can be safe in the center, and the women are like the energy that purify everything that comes in. So the food that comes in, they clean it, they purify it, the energies that come into the space. And for a woman to be able to do that, she has to feel safe to be fully present. So for that, like purifying or cleansing, whatever word feels best to happen, the space has to be safe as well. And that just came through so clearly, how for myself and many women that I speak to, we're not fully here. Like we're not fully present in this moment, and we lose parts. We lose that well, not lose, but like the power to be able to alchemize things, purify things, and cleanse a space is like parts of that aren't there anymore, because we're not fully in this physical body through our senses.
Yeah, it really resonates with me how women generally aren't safe on this planet, women and children, like, and how also like there's the ripple effect of that, just that deep insecurity of just physical safety, how that also affects how we birth. And so if you feel that in your bones, then there's no wonder why so many women seek the safety or perceived safety of the hospital, as walking in there will save her from,
Mm.
because it is a really huge portal. And birth, all women know that birth is opening the portal between life and death. Some women and babies will pass. That's just a reality. It's a very, very small percentage today, especially, just how healthy we are and how, just also modern medicine, of course, like antibiotics has a big deal with just minimizing and just the realization about hygiene, over 100 years ago when we realized that, oh, washing our hands between going from a dead body to a birthing body is a good idea. Women would die as much in hospital as in at home because of sepsis, because of infection, right? That was the big killer of women after birth.
Mm.
And so when we figured out hygiene and also had antibiotics, that small percentage, which is just so small now, is really truly like real, true, like medical
Mm.
things that just can't be avoided, whether you're in hospital or at home. Like it just will happen for a few small percentage. And when you realize that, because you know that, whether you're a very disconnected woman who knows very much, nothing about what we're talking about, or you're very clicked on, like, in your bones that this is a vulnerable thing to do and you need to be in safety. But what we
Mm.
think is safety today is actually really far from safety. It's
Mm.
actually very true. It's statistically proven. There's research on it, how if you are a healthy woman, healthy pregnancy, then you're at risk going into hospital. You are safe for birthing at home or in a birth center with midwives. That
Mm.
is research on. It's very clear. And so there's definitely, like, for example, the NHS in the UK, I mean, they have done studies on this. So that's why they're providing publicly funded home births and there's birth centers there. Same in, for example, Holland, um, same in New Zealand. There's a lot of places around the world where they've done the financial research on it and gone like, we can save money if women just can birth at home. It's actually not so much for maybe the women and the children, it's about finances. And also the opposite, why some countries won't do that is because there's a financial incentive to have all the women pay for the big facilities with all the high tech. They need all the women, also the healthy women to go in there to have all the interventions to actually pay for the facilities, whether it is publicly funded or not. So oh,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. It's all about the
The
money still,
unraveling.
very much
Yeah.
about the money.
Thank you so much for everything that you've shared. And I loved how you shared this example. We went through that story with you because it can just be words, right? And I think, okay, I'll speak for myself, but anytime I hear informed consent or human rights, there's a part of me that actually closes down. Like it's like the word that comes through, and this isn't truth, but it's the initial mindset is boring. The words humans
Yeah.
rights and informed consent. I remember as a nurse, when we went through that section, like when we did that in
Mm.
university, I was like, okay, boring. And I was probably doing something else because I'm like, how, to me, it seems so obvious that why would I need to
Yeah.
learn this? But then now I understand more. The reason it was boring wasn't because it was obvious, it was because it was a part that is so like tangled up, like in laws and
Mm.
people trying to control other human beings. And it means confrontation. Like the part that was saying it was boring was a part of me that doesn't like confrontation and would just prefer everything to go with the
Yeah.
flow. So it's like the way that you have spoke today, I've had goosebumps the whole time and it's been more of like an embodied experience. So I really appreciate how you're able to use your language to make this into everyone's business and make this interesting and make it something that we can really step into and understand and
Mm.
embody. So thank you for that. I would love to talk to you forever, but I would love I would love for you to share where the listeners can find you and what you have, what you're offering in the online space.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for having me on talking about this boring subject. That is, so important. And of course, I could say so much more about this. I mean, this is just what I've shared today is a tiny part of one lesson in a big module about sacred birth advocacy within my sacred birth worker mentorship. For me, having, been in a midwife in the system, witnessed doulas and birth workers come through and other midwives, what I really recognized is just that we who are the space holders of the portal of birth for women, we need to work on ourselves before we even step into that. And so, my offerings, my true like biggest right now purpose in life is to be a mentor for the women who want to work with other women within the birth portal. And I help them, I mentor them into being the best space holders they can be and birth advocates they can be. With this knowledge just being a tiny drop of the 6 months of content that I provide. And the first 2 months is all about working on the sisterhood wound, the witch wound, the throat chakra, our relationship to authority, our sexuality, our, vulva, our, amazing anatomy, our cycles, being cyclic women, our first rite of passage, the menarche, nature, how we are one with nature, and defining and redefining over and over again what is being a space holder, how to hold all the knowledge, but not impose it. You are not the expert. You are the space holder and the protector of a woman's own journey, her wisdom. So that's my true passion. And if anyone listening goes like, I'm curious about that, we have a new cohort starting in end of August 2024 this year. And they can find all the information at sacredbirthinternational.com or find me as the spiritual midwitch, of course, on Instagram. That's where I hang out. Of course, I also am here for pregnant women, birthing women. I do a lot of work and have courses. I have the natural birth course for a woman who's pregnant, the nourishing postpartum course for a woman who's pregnant, coaching for women who want to prepare for birth or want to debrief and heal from trauma.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. And is this cohort that's starting in August, is that how many people are in the group? Is it live?
Yes. Oh, yes. So I keep the group small, a maximum of 15 in one group. And we have 3 Thursdays a month that we meet for weaving in the feminine web. It's not me preaching down, it's very much weaving in the circle. It's a lot of interaction with the so it's an international cohort. There's women all over from Australia to Canada and the US, from Africa, South Africa, Europe. It's from all over, but it's a very tight-knit group. They get to meet a lot online, one-on-one as well as in the group. And I mentor, so you have one-on-one sessions with me once a month for 6 months, where you really get that personalized mentoring with me, and an online portal of learning materials. Like there's videos anywhere from 5 to 10 a week on different topics every week for 6 months. So there's a lot. It's a really deep, in-depth. I give all my wisdom from 20 years, all my midwifery wisdom, all my women's work, facilitation wisdom, all my just women's business stuff, everything. So it's really rich, and you get lifetime access to that.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. And it's been so nice to sit with you and to be in your presence. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.